I've been doing drug education for 25 years. I've been talking to a whole variety of audiences about drugs for most of my career. And slowly over the decades, my presentations have shifted as I start to offer something unique. Specifically, I offer at the beginning of my presentations an apology. And the apology that I offer is for the lies of past drug educators, including myself. Because people like me have historically exaggerated the harms, never acknowledged the benefits, and never acknowledged the harms of drug prohibition. We've told 3 lies: exaggerating the harms, never acknowledging the benefits, and never talking about drug prohibition. And I break those 3 lies. I actually offer what I call honest drug education, where I tell people the truth. Now, the truth is kind of complicated. The truth is not a simple process. And so really understanding the century-old relationship that the human species has had with substances is actually fairly difficult to do, because there's a lot of nuances in there. But at the end of the day, simply firing police at the problem is a huge failure for us and creates significant health and social problems for us. And we need to change our model. We need to fundamentally shift how our society deals with drugs. And not many people are talking about what an alternate model of regulating drugs would look like. To start that question, or to start that discussion, because really what we need is a public discussion about this. And to start the discussion, what I would suggest is that we start to look at what the options for us are. And the options are for all drugs. And then we can break it down into which tool we would use with which drug. So if I just kind of go through the list of various tools that could be used to control drugs without assigning them to the different drugs, I would start with age. And age specifically is currently used, and it's currently used with alcohol and tobacco, and it's either 18 or 19 across different provinces. Another tool that we could use is degree of intoxication. We already use it. We have a liquor store policy, a provincial liquor store policy, that says that we will not sell to intoxicated people. It could be on the list of tools. We could have proof of residency. That's used in the Netherlands. People who are, or there's a big discussion in the Netherlands right now about selling cannabis to locals only, because drug tourists tend to behave in ways that aren't controlled by the society. So proof of residency is a completely reasonable tool that could be used. Use location restrictions. We already use that for alcohol. It's called pubs. For tobacco, it's called groups of people that cluster in alleyways in the rain, and it's called inside our supervised injection site for heroin and cocaine. So we could control where people use drugs. We could have registration of purchasers, which we, to some extent, already do. It's called PharmaNet, where if you go to your doctor and you get some drugs, you'll be put on a provincial database. And we could have something like that for currently illegal drugs, and if we were sophisticated, we could have the price going up as people purchased more. We could have proof of need prior to purchase, because dependency is one reason why people take drugs, but there's a whole lot of other ones. And there's certainly periodically battles between governments and Aboriginal groups saying, hey, we want to have access to our sacred medicine. It's reasonable. There is no harm done by people who are resonating with their own ancient cultural history. I can honestly observe that any society that has had a benign relationship with a drug throughout time has not used all of the tools I've just looked at. Because really the tools I've just looked at I would best describe as administrative tools. It's about administration, it's about bureaucracy, it's about control of others. And really, that isn't the approach used by most societies. The approach used by most societies to control other people's drug-using behavior has been social controls, not administrative controls. Specifically, there are 3 types of social controls. There are social norms, social rituals, and sacred rituals. And social norms are just the normative behavior that societies develop. We don't drink alcohol with breakfast is an example of a social norm in North American society. Rituals also control many people's behavior. We have table manner rituals that are completely natural to our society. Most societies develop rituals. In fact, I would say all societies develop rituals around different behaviors. We could ritualize drug use. In fact, to work with prevention programs that are real and helpful, often work with people's drug-using rituals. And then there's the sacred ritual process. Sacred rituals have been used by communities that take drugs like ayahuasca or peyote, and they've been used for centuries. So it's a drug-using ritual that has a spiritual component. And again, being wise about drugs as opposed to completely non-evidence-based, we would actually start looking with some thoughtfulness about how people have used drugs from the beginning of the planet's recorded history. And we would introduce and discuss a new system that actually allows us to reduce the harms from drugs in our society, and at the end of the day, probably reduce the damage to our children.